She kept something in her bag for 5 years. No one knew what it was, no one asked, no one cared, until that rainy day, when everything fell apart, when her bag was opened. Her secret hit the floor, and the whole world stopped to look. In that moment, nothing was the same again. A story that will make you question everything you judge by appearance. The elevator of Greywall Command Hall rose slowly, and Elena Lawson felt her heart accelerating against her ribs. 24 years old, first real opportunity at one of the city's largest companies, and she was about to step into a world she never imagined being part of. The elevator's mirror reflected her image. Dark blue jeans, impeccably pressed white blouse, brown hair tied in a simple ponytail. Everything very ordinary. When the doors opened on the 23rd floor, Elena was greeted by mirrored glass-topped desks, and people who seemed to float in a universe of confidence that she didn't yet possess. A gray-haired woman in perfectly tailored suits approached with a corporate smile. "Welcome, Elena. I'm Patricia from Human Resources. You'll be working as an administrative assistant under the supervision of Miranda Whitmore, our Director of Operations." Elena extended her hand, trembling slightly. Patricia shook it firmly, that kind of handshake that promised professionalism but delivered indifference. The woman was already glancing at her watch while speaking. Miranda's demanding, but fair. "You'll do well if you work hard," Patricia said, without really believing her own words. As they walked through the office corridors, Elena noticed the glances. There was no obvious animosity, but something like silent cataloging. The new girl, the scholarship girl, because of course everyone knew. Greywall had a social inclusion program that was more important for public relations than actual inclusion. During the first break of the day, Elena sat alone in the cafeteria. Next to her, two women were talking quietly, but not quietly enough. "She must be on the scholarship program. Look at that outfit. Looks like she came straight from a thrift store," whispered one of them, laughing. Elena pretended not to hear, focusing on her black coffee and the apple she'd brought from home. She knew this type of judgment. It had been her constant companion since her father's death 5 years ago. The way people saw poverty not as circumstance but as character flaw, as if struggling to survive was somehow a personal failing. Her eyes wandered to the window overlooking the city. Somewhere out there in a small apartment in the South Side, her mother was working her shift as a nurse. 2 jobs, actually. Everything to keep them afloat. And Elena was here, on scholarship, determined to make it count. At her desk, a small corner space that felt like purgatory between the grand offices and the service areas, Elena found a thick folder waiting. Miranda Whitmore had left instructions. Detailed, precise, cold. The kind of instructions that left no room for personality or interpretation. That evening, Elena stayed 2 hours after everyone had left. She organized every document, created color-coded systems, and prepared morning briefings. She wanted to be invisible at first, then indispensable. That was the plan. Walking home on the crowded street, Elena reached into her worn leather bag, the same one her mother had given her years ago, and felt the familiar texture of folded fabric. The military uniform, green olive with golden insignias. Major Richard Lawson's uniform. Her father's uniform. She kept it close, not for sentiment alone, but for remembrance, for strength on days when the world seemed designed to diminish her. She whispered to the cool evening air. A ritual she'd maintained since his funeral. "I'm going to make you proud, Dad, I promise." The city lights glittered above her, indifferent. But Elena walked with her shoulders back, her chin slightly raised. She had inherited something more valuable than money from her father. She had inherited his dignity, his refusal to be diminished by circumstance. And that, she knew, was worth more than any salary Greywall Command Hall could offer. As she descended into the subway, Elena clutched her bag a little tighter. Tomorrow would be the real test. Tomorrow she would meet Miranda Whitmore face to face. Tomorrow her real journey would begin. But tonight she was simply a young woman carrying her father's legacy, step by step into a future that belonged to her alone. Miranda Whitmore was exactly what Elena expected, and nothing like she'd imagined. Tall, impeccably dressed, with sharp eyes that seemed to dissect everything they touched. She wore power like other people wore perfume, subtle but impossible to ignore. When Elena entered her office for the first time, Miranda didn't look up from her computer screen for what felt like an eternity. "Close the door quietly," Miranda finally said without glancing at her. "I don't appreciate disruptions." "Yes, ma'am," Elena replied, her voice steady despite the nervousness churning in her stomach. Miranda turned her chair slowly, now giving Elena her full attention. The director's gaze traveled from Elena's shoes to her face, a journey that felt more like an inspection than an introduction. Elena resisted the urge to fidget with her hands. "I see Patricia assigned you to me," Miranda said, leaning back in her leather chair. "The scholarship program. How noble." There was no warmth in her tone, only a carefully measured skepticism. Tell me, Elena, do you know what it takes to succeed in a place like this? Elena's throat felt dry. She had prepared for many possible first conversations, but not this one, not this direct challenge disguised as a question. I believe it takes hard work and dedication, ma'am, Elena answered carefully. Miranda smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Hard work is what people without talent rely on. We need competence here. We need people who understand the game, who know how to navigate corporate structure, who have presence. She paused, letting her words settle like stones thrown into still water. I'm not sure you have any of those things. Elena felt the sting of it, sharp and immediate, but she didn't show it. She had learned years ago how to compartmentalize pain, to file it away for later processing. Right now, she needed to remain calm. I'm willing to learn, Elena said simply. Everyone is willing, Miranda replied dismissively. That's not what I asked. Over the following weeks, Miranda subjected Elena to an endless stream of tasks designed, it seemed, to test not just her competence but her breaking point. She'd ask Elena to redo reports 3 times, each time changing the parameters without explanation. She'd make calls in Elena's presence that were deliberately loud, discussing the quality issues with new staff while staring directly at her. She'd praise other assistants lavishly in front of Elena, always noting their prestigious backgrounds, their prestigious universities, their right kind of families. Yet Elena persisted. She worked through lunch, stayed late without complaining, and maintained a professional demeanor, despite the constant, deliberate undermining. She began to understand that Miranda's behavior wasn't really about her performance. It was about something else entirely. A prejudice so ingrained that it had become invisible to its bearer. One afternoon, as Elena delivered coffee exactly the way Miranda preferred it black, 1 sugar, 165 degrees, Miranda actually paused. She looked at Elena with something resembling confusion, as if seeing her for the first time. For just a moment, Elena thought perhaps something might shift. Instead, Miranda said, "You have potential to be a very competent secretary." That's something. It was the closest she'd come to a compliment, and they both knew it meant nothing. Elena nodded, accepted the backhanded praise, and returned to her desk. She had her eye on something bigger. She had discovered that Miranda, for all her coldness, made mistakes when she was tired. And Elena had begun quietly catching them: errors in financial reports, missed details in contracts, scheduling conflicts that could have cost the company thousands. She didn't tell anyone. She simply fixed them quietly and visibly. Because Elena understood something fundamental that Miranda had yet to learn: real power didn't announce itself. It worked in the background, essential and unseen, until the moment it was needed most. And that moment Elena knew was coming. 3 months into her employment, everything changed on a gray Tuesday morning. Elena arrived at her desk to find unusual activity on the 23rd floor. Executives moved with urgency, doors closed behind them with deliberate firmness, and whispers traveled through the office like electricity through copper wire. She didn't need to ask what happened. She overheard it in fragments: a missing laptop from Miranda's office, classified documents potentially compromised, a security investigation about to be launched. The laptop wasn't just any device. It contained sensitive information about upcoming acquisitions, employee records, and financial data that could be worth millions on the black market. Elena felt her stomach tighten. She understood immediately what was coming. By noon, Miranda emerged from a conference room looking furious. Her eyes swept across the office, and when they landed on Elena, something crystallized in her expression. She approached Elena's desk with deliberate slowness, like a predator that had already decided on its prey. "My office, now," she commanded. Inside Miranda's corner office, Elena found herself facing not just her boss, but 3 security officers and the head of the legal department, a man named Mr. Harrison, whom Elena had never met but whose reputation preceded him. He was known for being ruthless with suspected corporate theft. "Elena, we have a situation," Miranda began, her voice eerily calm. "A company laptop has gone missing from my office. Sensitive materials were on that device. Very sensitive. The kind of information that could be worth a significant amount of money to the right buyer." Elena's heart began to race, but she forced herself to breathe slowly. "I understand. How can I help?" "You can help by opening your bag," Mr. Harrison said coldly, stepping forward. A routine check, to rule out any involvement. It was a statement posed as a request, but everyone in the room understood the underlying threat. Refuse and you're guilty. Comply and you're suspect. Elena was trapped in the logic of corporate accusation. She didn't want to do it. Everything in her screamed to refuse, to demand a lawyer, to protect her privacy. But she also knew that in that moment, she was the most vulnerable person in the room. A young woman on a scholarship program with no connections, no family money to hire expensive lawyers. She was expendable. Slowly, Elena reached down and lifted her worn leather bag onto Miranda's glass desk. She could see her own reflection in it, distorted and small. "Go ahead," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. Mr. Harrison watched as Elena opened the bag. She removed her wallet, her keys, a small notebook where she kept her class schedules. She was still studying administration at night. A lunch container. Her mother had packed for her student ID, and a pen. Nothing. No laptop, no stolen documents. Just the ordinary possessions of an ordinary young woman trying to survive in an extraordinary situation. The security officers exchanged glances. Miranda's face remained impassive, but then Elena's fingers felt something at the very bottom of the bag where the fabric had slightly torn. Something soft and folded. The uniform emerged first. Military green olive, meticulously maintained despite its age. The insignias caught the office light, gleaming with a dignity that stood in stark contrast to the harsh fluorescent bulbs above them. A badge was pinned to the uniform's chest. The name was embroidered in careful stitches, Major Richard Lawson. For a moment, the only sound in the office was the gentle hum of the air conditioning. Miranda's face had gone pale. Mr. Harrison stepped backward almost involuntarily. The security officers exchanged confused glances, unsure now of what they were witnessing. Elena stared at the uniform she had kept so close for so long. She thought about her father, his sacrifice, his honor, his belief that integrity was worth more than any promotion or paycheck. She thought about him teaching her, even from beyond the grave, that sometimes you have to let people see who you really are. Not because they deserve to, but because you deserve to be seen. The office fell into a silence so complete that it felt like the world had paused. Miranda reached out slowly and picked up the uniform, holding it as if it were made of glass, afraid it might shatter in her hands. Her eyes moved to the badge, reading the name over and over as if repetition might change what was written there. "Major Richard Lawson," she whispered. "My father," Elena said quietly. Her voice was calm now, emptied of the fear that had consumed her moments before. "He was a major in the armed forces. He died 5 years ago on a humanitarian mission in Central Africa. He was there trying to help people who had nothing." Mr. Harrison's expression shifted dramatically. The anger that had characterized his entrance into the room drained away, replaced by something resembling recognition or perhaps shame. "I keep his uniform in my bag because he taught me something important," Elena continued, her gaze moving from Miranda to Mr. Harrison to the security officers. "He taught me that character isn't something you wear on your sleeve. It's something you carry inside yourself. And he taught me that integrity means more than profit, more than advancement, more than protecting yourself by hurling accusations at innocent people." Miranda slowly lowered the uniform, and for the first time Elena saw something genuine in her director's expression: vulnerability. A crack in the carefully constructed facade of certainty and authority. Miranda began, but Elena raised her hand gently. "The laptop," Elena said. "It wasn't me. It wasn't anyone who works here. You should check the security footage from 3 a.m. last Tuesday. There was a man in a gray maintenance uniform who isn't scheduled in any of the records. I noticed it when I was leaving my evening admin work, but I didn't say anything because I thought perhaps I was mistaken." She hadn't been mistaken. She had seen many things working her long hours. She had observed the building's rhythms, learned when people came and went, noticed inconsistencies that others missed. But she had remained silent, not wanting to seem like she was overstepping, not wanting to draw attention to herself. Mr. Harrison immediately spoke into his radio, requesting the security team pull footage from that time and date. Within minutes, his suspicions were confirmed. A man with no credentials had indeed accessed the building, stolen the laptop, and left. He had been caught on camera, but had somehow slipped through the building's inadequate security protocols. "Check the external database," Elena added. The maintenance company's records were updated manually around 3:15 that morning. Someone erased the man's entry and replaced it with a legitimate maintenance worker's name from a different shift. Miranda stared at Elena with an expression that combined confusion, shame, and a dawning comprehension of what she had nearly done. She had been so quick to accuse, so eager to find guilt in the easiest target, that she had almost destroyed an innocent person based purely on prejudice and assumption. "How did you know all this?" Mr. Harrison asked, his tone now respectful rather than threatening. "I pay attention," Elena replied. "I notice things, and I think about consequences. I think about what happens to people when accusations are made without evidence. I've lived through enough injustice to know what it feels like to be judged before being understood." The security officers were asked to leave. Mr. Harrison excused himself, making phone calls to initiate a proper investigation. Miranda was left alone with Elena, the uniform still in her hands. "I owe you an apology," Miranda said finally. "More than an apology, actually. I've been treating you like you were less than you are. I made assumptions based on your appearance, your background, your circumstances. I was wrong." Elena nodded slowly. She wasn't ready to accept the apology yet. Apologies were words, and words were easy. What mattered now was whether Miranda's actions would change, whether she would extend the same respect to others that she had suddenly discovered Elena deserved. I think what matters now, Elena said carefully, is whether you use what you've learned to treat everyone here with respect. Not just me, everyone. Miranda held the uniform out toward Elena, but Elena didn't immediately take it. Keep it for a moment longer, Elena said. Read the name. Remember the person who wore it. Remember that beneath every uniform, whether it's military green or business formal, there's a human being with a story, with dignity, with worth that has nothing to do with their salary or their background. For the first time, Elena saw tears forming in Miranda's eyes. The news of what had happened spread through Greywall Command Hall with the speed of electricity through copper wire. By the end of that day, everyone knew. The poor scholarship girl, the one people had made jokes about, the one who had been quietly judged in cafeterias and whispered about near copiers. She was the daughter of a decorated military officer who had given his life for others. But the most striking part of the story, the part that made people pause, was that Elena had helped catch the actual thief while being accused. She had possessed information that could have cleared her immediately, but she hadn't used it as a weapon. She had simply provided the truth calmly and without accusation. In the days that followed, Elena found herself in an unfamiliar position. People who had previously ignored her now greeted her with elaborate courtesy. The woman who had made the thrift store joke attempted an awkward apology in the bathroom. Colleagues suddenly became interested in her thoughts during meetings. The scholarship girl had become interesting, not because of who she actually was, but because of who her father had been. Elena hated it. She continued working at the same desk, completing the same tasks, maintaining the same professionalism she had always maintained. But inside she was processing something far more complex than triumph or vindication. She was grappling with the uncomfortable truth that people had looked right through her until there was a reason to look at her. They hadn't changed. They had just found a different way to categorize her. Miranda called her into her office a week after the incident. Elena found her boss sitting at her desk looking exhausted, as if she hadn't slept properly. I wanted to talk to you about your role here, Miranda began carefully. The company would like to offer you a promotion, a significant one. Assistant Director of Operations, the salary would triple. You'd have your own office, your own team. Elena listened without responding immediately. She understood what was happening. This was guilt transforming into action. Corporate apologies expressed in currency rather than words. What if I don't want it? Elena asked finally. Miranda looked genuinely surprised. Excuse me? I appreciate the offer, Elena said carefully, but I'm not ready for that position. Not because I'm not capable, but because I haven't earned it yet. Taking it now would just be another form of being judged on something outside of my actual work, first judged by my poverty, now judged by my father's accomplishments. I want to be promoted because I'm excellent at my job, not because I'm sympathetic. Miranda sat back in her chair, and Elena could see the struggle playing out on her face, the desire to salve her guilty conscience warring with the recognition that Elena was right. So what do you want? Miranda asked. I want respect. Real respect, not performance respect. And I want to finish my administration degree without having to work 2 jobs. The scholarship covers tuition, but not living expenses. I need to work here while I study. In 6 months, if I'm still here and I'm still performing well, we can revisit that promotion conversation with clean hands. Miranda nodded slowly. I can arrange a flexible schedule and a salary increase to help with living expenses, not contingent on any future promotion just because it's fair compensation for what you're doing. Thank you, Elena said. And she meant it. This wasn't redemption, but it was honesty. It was an acknowledgement that things needed to change. That respect couldn't be retroactively applied. That real equality meant not just in moments of crisis, but in the daily, unglamorous work of showing up and being treated as an equal. As Elena stood to leave, Miranda said something that surprised her. I knew your father. Not well, but I met him once at a military charity event years ago. He spoke about his daughter, about you. He said that you had inherited his impossibly strong character. I didn't make the connection because I wasn't looking for one. I was too busy looking down. Elena paused at the door. He used to say something to me when I was angry or hurt. He said, Elena, every injustice you witness in the world is an invitation to build a better one. You can either accept that invitation, or you can let anger consume you. But there's no neutral ground. She looked back at Miranda. I hope you accept the invitation too. That evening, Elena took the subway home. She sat by the window watching the city pass by in streaks of light and shadow. She pulled out the uniform from her bag. She had insisted on taking it home, and held it close. In her mind, she wasn't on a crowded train heading to a small apartment in an outer borough. She was sitting with her father on the porch of their house, listening to him talk about integrity, about dignity, about what it meant to be part of something larger than yourself. I'm doing it, Dad, she whispered. Not for them. Not for the promotion or the respect or the salary increase. I'm doing it because you taught me how. The uniform felt warm in her hands, and she could almost hear his voice responding, I know, Mia Moore. I know. 6 months passed, and with them came a slow transformation of Greywall Command Hall. It wasn't a dramatic change. There were no company-wide speeches about inclusion or diversity training sessions. Instead, it was something quieter and more fundamental. Miranda, working alongside Elena, began to see her workplace through new eyes. Elena had taken the flexible schedule Miranda offered and used it wisely. She attended her evening classes, completed her degree, and continued to excel at her work during the daytime hours. But something unexpected happened along the way. She began mentoring other scholarship students who entered the program. There were 3 of them in the first cohort after Elena: a young man named David, who came from a homeless background, a woman named Sophia, who was the first in her family to attend university, and a teenager named Marcus, who was struggling with the imposter syndrome that came from being suddenly surrounded by wealth and privilege. Elena recognized herself in all of them. She saw the small ways they were being judged, the subtle exclusions, the microaggressions that were often so small they seemed insignificant unless you were on the receiving end of them every single day. She began having quiet conversations with them during lunch breaks. She would share her own experiences, offer practical advice on navigating office politics, and most importantly, she reminded them that where they came from didn't determine where they were going. Miranda observed this mentoring from a distance. She noticed how Elena's presence seemed to steady these younger employees, how their confidence grew in her presence, how they began to perform better not because they were being treated differently, but because they were being treated as equals. One afternoon, Miranda sat down with Elena in the small break room. It was a deliberately casual setting, suggesting that what Miranda had to say was important enough to warrant a private conversation, but not so important as to require the formality of an office. I've been watching what you do with the other scholarship students, Miranda said, the mentoring, the support. It's extraordinary. Elena sipped her coffee. She had learned not to assume anything about where these conversations were heading. I've been doing a lot of reflecting, Miranda continued, about my role here, about what I've built, about what I could build if I chose differently. And I realized something. I became a director by being the best at what I did, but I forgot what it took to be the best. I forgot that excellence requires caring about people, not just metrics. She paused, looking out the window at the city below. I want to implement a mentoring program, a formal one. I want to make it part of our company culture that people with advantages help people who are starting with less, not as charity, as good business practice and basic human decency. Elena listened carefully. And you want me to lead it? I want you to be the deputy director of the program, Miranda said. You'd work with HR to implement it across the company. Your title would be head of professional development and inclusion. The salary comes with that title, and you'd have resources to actually do meaningful work. No more answering phones or making coffee unless you choose to. This was the moment Elena had been waiting for, though she hadn't fully admitted it to herself. This was the promotion she had earned, not through her father's legacy or her scholarship status, but through her actual competence, her genuine care for others, and her consistent demonstration of integrity. I'll do it, Elena said, but with one condition, which is David, Sophia, and Marcus need to be part of this program too. They work here, they have perspectives that are valuable, and they understand what it's like to start from nothing. We don't build inclusion programs without the voices of the people those programs are designed to help. Miranda smiled. Done. Over the following months, Elena poured herself into building what would become known throughout Greywall as the Pathways Initiative. She created mentoring partnerships, organized professional development workshops, and most importantly, she created a culture where people from different backgrounds could thrive without having to diminish who they were or where they came from. She still carried her father's uniform in her bag, but now it was there for a different reason. Not as a symbol of her struggles, but as a reminder of what excellence looked like when combined with service to others. She would sometimes take it out and show it to people in the program, telling them about the man who wore it, about his sacrifices and his values. And slowly, subtly, the way people looked at each other began to change. The young scholarship students started to see themselves not as outsiders trying to fit in, but as people bringing something valuable into a community that desperately needed what they had to offer. A year after that first incident, the company announced a renovation of the main lobby of Greywall Command Hall. The redesign was meant to be modern, sleek, more welcoming to the diverse workforce the company was attempting to cultivate. But embedded within that renovation was something more personal. Elena had worked with the design team to create a memorial wall. It wasn't large or ostentatious. It was simply a dedication plaque positioned in a place of quiet prominence, visible to anyone entering the building but not demanding attention, not seeking accolades. The inscription read, Major Richard Lawson, 1968 to 2017, a soldier, a humanitarian, and a father who taught us that true courage is found in compassion. He gave everything so that others might have something. His legacy lives in every act of integrity, every moment of kindness, every decision to see the humanity in the people around us. Below the plaque was a small alcove where Elena had placed a single item, a photograph of her father in his military uniform, but not a formal portrait. It was a candid shot taken during a humanitarian mission showing Major Lawson surrounded by children, smiling, alive, present, the kind of photograph that captured essence rather than formality. The dedication ceremony was small but meaningful. Elena's mother was there, standing quietly beside her daughter, tears streaming down her face as she looked at the photograph of her late husband. Her hands shook as she touched the plaque, as if making contact with his name made him real again, brought him closer. Miranda was there too, standing respectfully in the background. And the scholarship students, David, Sophia, Marcus, and the new cohort who had entered the program, they came to bear witness to the moment when one family's private grief became a community's public remembrance. Elena stood in front of the memorial and she felt something shift inside her. For 5 years she had carried her father with her as a private weight, a personal responsibility, a constant reminder of what she was striving toward. Now his memory was integrated into the place where she worked, woven into the fabric of the company's culture. It wasn't just her burden anymore, it was shared. After the ceremony, as people dispersed, an older man approached Elena. He was distinguished, with gray hair and kind eyes. He introduced himself as Mr. Grant, one of the company's founding partners. "I knew your father," he said, his voice carrying the weight of genuine emotion. "It was a long time ago. We were both young, both idealistic, both committed to making the world better. I was at a medical station in Peru when his unit came through. We had a shortage of supplies and the situation was dire. Your father gave us medical equipment from his own allocation, equipment he knew his unit might need. He said that it didn't matter where the need was. Human suffering was human suffering." Elena felt tears forming. She had heard many stories about her father since his death, but each one still had the power to move her, to show her different facets of a man she had loved deeply but had known incompletely. "He was a good man," Mr. Grant continued, "and clearly he had a wonderful daughter." After Mr. Grant left, Elena stood alone in front of the memorial. She pulled out her father's uniform, now protected in a clear archival quality case that would preserve it for future generations. She held it up to the photograph, comparing the fabric to the image, making sure the connection between past and present remained visible. "We did it, Dad," she whispered. "Not just me. We did it together. You're here now, part of something bigger than just family memory. You're part of the culture of this place. You're part of how people treat each other every single day." She thought about the young scholarship students who would pass by this memorial every morning, who would read about a man who believed that integrity was worth more than advancement, who would understand through his story and through her example that where you come from doesn't determine where you're going. That evening, Elena went home to the small apartment she and her mother shared. For the first time since her father's death, the apartment felt less like a place of grieving and more like a place of belonging. Her mother had finally let go of some of the photographs, had rearranged the furniture, had allowed the space to transform from a shrine to a home. They sat together on the porch, watching the city lights emerge as dusk fell into darkness. Elena's mother took her hand, squeezed it gently, and said something she hadn't said in a very long time. "Your father would be so proud of who you've become." And for the first time, Elena didn't cry when she heard that. Instead, she smiled, because she finally understood what her father had been trying to teach her all along, that pride wasn't something you received from others. It was something you built within yourself, day by day, choice, by refusing to let circumstance determine your character. The Pathways Initiative had become one of Greywall Command Hall's most celebrated programs. The company had won awards for its commitment to diversity and inclusion. But more importantly, it had become a place where people from all backgrounds could genuinely thrive. Elena, now 26 years old, had been promoted to Vice Director of Organizational Culture, a position that had been created specifically for her, recognizing that what she had built transcended traditional human resources categories. Her office was modest, deliberately so. While other executives decorated their spaces with expensive art and furniture that signaled status, Elena's office remained simple. The walls were lined with photographs of scholarship students who had succeeded at Greywall, with certificates of achievement, with letters from people whose lives had been changed by the program she'd created. The most prominent item in the space, however, was a framed photograph of her father in his military uniform, positioned where she could see it every day. Elena had brought her mother to work several times now. Her mother, who had spent so many years working 2 jobs to keep them afloat, had taken early retirement from nursing. With Elena's help, She had started a nonprofit organization that provided financial literacy and job training to women in their community who were struggling with poverty and single parenthood. The two women worked together, not always without tension, but always with the deep connection of people who had survived something together and came out the other side more resilient. On a Tuesday morning in spring, Elena was preparing for a major presentation to the company's board of directors. The Pathways Initiative had achieved remarkable metrics. Scholarship students had a 94% retention rate, compared to 78% for the general population. They were being promoted at the same rate as their peers, and most importantly, they were creating a cultural shift within the company. The program had been expanded to other Graywall offices in different cities. As she was reviewing her presentation, Miranda knocked on the door. The woman who had once looked at Elena with barely concealed contempt now entered with genuine warmth and respect. "Ready for the board?" Miranda asked, sitting down across from Elena's desk. "I think so," Elena replied. "The numbers are strong. We have testimonials from participants. We have clear evidence that this program is creating a more inclusive, more innovative company." Miranda nodded. "I wanted to talk to you about something before you present. The board has been discussing succession planning. I'm thinking about stepping down in 2 years. I'm going to be 65, and I've realized that I want to do something different with the second half of my life. I want to focus on mentoring, on building something with more social impact." Elena listened carefully, unsure where this was leading. "I'm recommending you as my successor," Miranda continued. "You'll be young for the position, 28. When you start, but you've proven that age is less important than wisdom and character. You've shown that you understand how to navigate this company's culture while also transforming it. And most importantly, you've demonstrated that leadership isn't about power over people. It's about empowering people." Elena felt her throat tighten. This was monumental. This was recognition at a level she had never anticipated, even in her most ambitious moments. "Before you answer," Miranda added, "I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Not because of your father, not because of where you came from, but because of who you are, what you've accomplished, and what you've chosen to build. You could have taken that promotion 2 years ago and focused on your own advancement. Instead, you chose to lift others up. That's the mark of someone who should lead." After Miranda left, Elena sat alone in her office for a long time. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The girl with the worn leather bag, the one people had looked right through. She thought about her father, about his belief that integrity was worth more than advancement, about his sacrifice for people he would never meet. She pulled out her phone and called her mother. "Mommy, I need to tell you something," Elena said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm going to be the next director of Graywall Command Hall. I'm going to lead this company." Her mother was quiet for a moment, and then Elena heard the sound of her crying. Not tears of sadness, but tears of overwhelming joy. "Your father always said you would do extraordinary things," her mother said through tears. "He always believed in you. Even when things were hard, even when we didn't have much, he would tell me, 'My Elena is going to change the world.' I can see it in her." That evening, Elena took her father's uniform out of the archival case. She held it close, not as a weight anymore, but as an embrace. She thought about all the moments of doubt she had experienced, all the times she had questioned whether she belonged, all the instances when the world had tried to convince her that her worth was determined by her bank account or her family background. She thought about the woman who had made the thrift store joke, who had later apologized. She thought about Miranda's transformation, about the scholarship students who were now thriving, about her mother's nonprofit helping hundreds of women every month. She thought about all the ways that one moment of courage showing her father's uniform instead of hiding, it had created ripples that extended far beyond herself. Elena went to the memorial in the lobby of Graywall Command Hall. She stood in front of her father's photograph and her own reflection, superimposed on the glass protecting the image. For a moment she was both herself and him, 2 generations separated by time but connected by values, by integrity, by a refusal to let the world define their worth. "I'm going to do good things with this position, Dad," she whispered. "I'm going to remember where I came from. I'm going to make sure that other people like me, like us, get to belong here too. I promise." The memorial was quiet, peaceful, a space that had become sacred not through religious designation but through the genuine care of people who understood that remembrance was a form of honor. Other employees passed by, sometimes reading the inscription, looking at the photograph, and Elena liked to think that her father's legacy lived not just in her own choices, but in the way those employees treated each other, in the decisions they made to see the humanity in everyone around them. Elena's first day as director of Graywall Command Hall arrived on a Monday in spring. The lobby was packed with employees, not gathered there because they were required to be, but because they wanted to witness the moment. They wanted to see one of their own elevated to the highest position in the company. Elena wore a business suit tailored specifically for her, elegant and professional. But she also wore something else, a small pendant that contained a fiber from her father's military uniform protected in a transparent casing. It rested against her heart, a constant reminder of where she came from and what she had promised to remember. Her first act as director was unconventional. Instead of addressing the entire company with a formal speech, she invited small groups of employees, scholarship students, maintenance workers, executives, interns to her office for coffee. She wanted to know them, not as functions in an organization, but as people. She wanted to understand their stories, their struggles, their dreams. The meetings revealed something that data and reports had only hinted at. While the Pathways Initiative had successfully integrated scholarship students into the company, there were other vulnerable populations who were struggling. The support staff, particularly women who worked in cleaning and maintenance, faced their own challenges. They worked irregular hours, had minimal benefits, and were often treated as invisible, present but not seen, essential but not valued. Elena brought this to the board's attention during her first quarterly meeting as director. She proposed expanding the Pathways Initiative to include not just scholarship students but also support staff. She proposed better pay, flexible scheduling, and professional development opportunities for people who had been traditionally overlooked. This will increase costs, one of the board members pointed out. Our profit margins are strong enough to accommodate human decency. Elena interrupted politely but firmly. We've already proven that investing in people increases retention, productivity, and loyalty. We've won awards for our commitment to diversity. Now we have the opportunity to make that commitment extend to everyone in this organization, not just the people who fit our current definition of talented or ambitious. The board voted unanimously in favor of the expansion. By the end of Elena's first year as director, the program had been expanded to include mentoring for all support staff, financial literacy training, and clear pathways for internal promotion. One evening, Elena was working late in her office when she received an unexpected visitor. A woman in her 50s carrying a cleaning cart knocked on her door hesitantly. "Miss Lawson? I'm Rosa. I work in the cleaning department. I just wanted to thank you. My daughter got enrolled in the scholarship program. She's going to be the first in our family to go to college. She starts next fall." Elena stood up and walked around her desk, genuinely interested. "That's wonderful, Rosa. Tell me about her." They talked for nearly an hour. Rosa shared her story, how she had worked as a cleaner for 20 years, how she had wanted more for her children but didn't know how to help them access it, how the Pathways Initiative had suddenly made the impossible seem possible. "Your father," Rosa said as she was leaving, "he was a good man. Everyone knew that. But what you're doing, you're taking his legacy and multiplying it. You're making his sacrifice mean something for thousands of people. That's beautiful." After Rosa left, Elena sat at her desk and cried. Not tears of sadness, but of the profound emotion that comes when you finally understand the full impact of your choices. When you see how one person's courage can ripple across generations, creating waves of positive change that extend far beyond what any individual could accomplish alone. She pulled out a photograph, a picture of her father, Rosa's daughter, and Elena herself, taken at a Pathways Initiative graduation ceremony. 3 generations, different backgrounds, different experiences, but all connected by a commitment to lifting others up. She posted it on the company's internal network with a simple caption, "This is why we do this work. This is what it means to build a company with integrity." By the end of Elena's 5th year as director, Greywall Command Hall had transformed. It had become a company known not just for its profits, but for its commitment to human dignity. It had won national awards for its inclusive practices. More importantly, it had become a place where a young person from any background could walk through those doors and believe that their circumstances didn't determine their destiny. Elena stood in her office, the office that had once belonged to Miranda, and before that to men whose names had been forgotten, and she looked at the photographs lining her walls. Hundreds of them. Scholarship students who had gone on to leadership positions, support staff who had been promoted, young people whose lives had been changed by the simple belief that everyone deserved a chance to thrive. And in the center of all those photographs, still in its archival quality frame, was the image of her father, Major Richard Lawson, the man who had taught her that true nobility never announces itself, that integrity is worth more than any promotion, and that service to others is the highest calling a person can answer. 10 years after Elena walked into Greywall Command Hall as a terrified scholarship student, she stood in the lobby with her mother. They were unveiling an expanded version of the memorial dedicated to her father. It was no longer just a plaque. It had become a room of quiet space where people could reflect, where students could study, where anyone in the company could find peace away from the chaos of corporate life. The walls displayed photographs and stories not just of Major Richard Lawson, but of other men and women from underprivileged backgrounds who had risen to positions of leadership in corporate America. It told the story of how one company had decided to value integrity over prestige, character over credentials, and the potential in everyone over the assumptions society had taught us to make. Elena's mother, now in her 70s, squeezed her daughter's hand as they stood in front of the memorial. Her eyes were wet with tears. "He would be so proud," Elena's mother whispered. "Not just of what you've accomplished professionally, but of who you've chosen to be. You could have forgotten where you came from once you made it. So many people do. But you built a ladder, and you're helping others climb." Elena nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She thought about all the moments that had led to this, the humiliation of that day when her bag was searched, the courage it had taken to reveal her secret, the years of quiet work building something meaningful. She thought about Miranda, who had retired 3 years ago and now worked with Elena as a consultant on inclusion initiatives. The two women had become genuine friends, partners in the work of transforming not just their company but their entire industry. She thought about David, Sophia, and Marcus, the first cohort of scholarship students she had mentored. David was now the company's chief technology officer. Sophia had started her own consulting firm specializing in organizational culture. Marcus worked in Elena's department, helping to expand the Pathways initiative to other companies who wanted to replicate Graywall's success. She thought about Rose's daughter, who had graduated from college and was now working as an entry-level analyst at Graywall. She thought about the hundreds of families who had been transformed by the opportunities that had been created, not through charity, but through a fundamental reimagining of what it meant to build a company with values. That evening, Elena took out her father's uniform one last time. It had been preserved perfectly, protected in a climate-controlled archival case that she had created to ensure it would last for generations. She held it close, but this time she didn't feel the weight of it as a burden. Instead, she felt it as a gift, the legacy of a man who had loved her completely, who had taught her through example that dignity was more valuable than any possession, and that the truest form of power was the power to lift others up. She carefully placed the uniform in a new permanent display case in the memorial room, positioned where it could be seen by everyone who entered. Beside it, she placed a letter, typed and dated, written in her own hand for future generations to read. "This uniform belonged to Major Richard Lawson, my father. He wore it while serving his country and helping people in need. He never made much money. He never held a prestigious position in a major corporation. By the world standards, he was not a success. But he taught me something that changed everything, that success is not measured by salary or status, but by the positive impact you have on the people around you. He taught me that integrity is worth more than any promotion, that character is worth more than credentials, and that the true measure of a life well lived is not what you accumulate, but what you leave behind." This uniform is here to remind us that real nobility doesn't announce itself. It works quietly, building connections, opening doors, lifting people up. It works even when no one is watching, because the work itself is the reward. If you are reading this, I hope you will remember that you matter. Your story matters. Your background doesn't determine your destination. And you have the power to be part of something larger than yourself, to be someone who helps others believe in their own possibilities. That is the legacy my father left me. That is the legacy I hope to leave the world. With gratitude and love, Elena Lawson, Director, Graywall Command Hall. As Elena locked the display case, she whispered one final time to the uniform, to her father, to the part of herself that had always carried his memory. "I did it, Dad. We did it together. Your life meant something, your sacrifice meant something, and everyone who comes through those doors will know that they matter, that their potential is real, and that they deserve to be seen." The memorial room fell silent. Outside, the city continued its endless movement, its billions of people pursuing their own ambitions, fighting their own battles, carrying their own secrets. But in that quiet space, that room dedicated to a man who had given everything and asked for nothing in return, a different story was being told. It was a story about a poor girl who carried her father's uniform in a worn leather bag. It was a story about how she refused to be diminished by circumstance. It was a story about how one act of courage rippled across decades, touching thousands of lives, building something beautiful and lasting. But most importantly, it was a story about the transformative power of integrity, the revolutionary act of seeing people as they truly are, and the quiet nobility that comes from dedicating your life not to your own advancement, but to the advancement of everyone around you. And as Elena walked out of the memorial room that evening, she left the light on a small symbolic gesture, but a meaningful one. The light would stay on, illuminating the path for the next person who needed to believe that their story mattered, that their potential was real, and that they too could change the world by refusing to accept the world's narrow definitions of success. In the lobby, the memorial plaque still stood, the photograph still glowed, and the name still shined. Major Richard Lawson, 1968 to 2017, a soldier, a humanitarian, and a father who taught us that true courage is found in compassion. He gave everything so that others might have something. His legacy lives in every act of integrity, every moment of kindness, every decision to see the humanity in the people around us. And beneath it, added by Alina, were these final words: "He lives on in those he taught to believe that they matter." If this story touched you in any way, take a moment to share it. Somewhere out there, someone might need this reminder that kindness still matters and that what we carry inside often speaks louder than what we wear outside. Leave a comment below and tell us what you felt while watching. Don't forget to like the video, share it with someone you care about, and if you'd like to hear more stories like this one, subscribe and stay with us. Tell me in the comments, from which country are you watching this story today?